Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to the very first edition of Tim Collects. Tim the Bat Boy. So, growing up on the north side of Chicago in the 1960s was about as perfect as it can get. We lived only about a mile and a half from Wrigley Field, and during the period of late 60s, the Cubs were really coming on as great entertainment, great baseball team. 4 Hall of Famers, Ron Santo, Billy Williams, of course Ernie Banks, Fergie Jenkins, with other perennial all-stars like Don Kessinger and Glenn Beckert in the infield, Gold Gloves and batting championships. Of course, Jim Hickman, another star. What a great time to be a Cub fan. All the games were during the day, so we would play baseball during the morning and then make our way over to Wrigley Field to watch the Cubs, where we got a free ticket for helping the Cubs clean up after the game by flipping seats in the grandstand and picking up some of the trash. What a great way to spend the summer. So we went all the time, and we got to know everybody in the baseball park, including all the ushers and the concessions guys and even the grounds crew guys, and most importantly for me, the clubhouse guys on the visiting clubhouse side. So he did this for many years and had many great times at the ballpark. And lo and behold, when I was 15 years old, I was offered the bat boy job for the visiting team at Wrigley Field. So I was 15 years old, and I worked for 2 years, 1972 and 1973. I got one paycheck at the end of the season. It was for $400 for 81 games worked, so about $5 a day. But the truth is, I would have done it for nothing. And I got to be close to all the ballpark, to all my major league stars. I got to be in the clubhouse and on the bench with guys like Willie Mays and Hank Aaron, Roberto Clemente, Willie Stargell, you name it. And at that time, I started to collect baseball bats, because, as we all know, baseball players will crack bats, and we collected them in our clubhouse. And we used to sell the bats to the Cubby Bear Lounge on the corner of Addison and Clark Street. And we only got $2 a piece for them. Can you believe it? Way back in the day, $2. Well, I started to see bats appear that were cracked from guys like Willie Mays and Roberto Clemente and Johnny Bench. And I thought, whoa, these are really cool. And I just was so attracted to bats. I worked out a deal where I traded my rights to some of the money for the right to bring some of the bats home and bring them. We actually played with a few of them too, which you're not supposed to do with these very valuable gamers, but we couldn't help ourselves. We brought them to the playground, and we brought them to our games over at Winnemac Park. So I want to tell the story today about the great Roberto Clemente. And I am so fortunate to have in my possession a Roberto Clemente game-used bat. It's a monster bat. It's over 36 inches long, and it weighs about 38 ounces. And it's one of the best Roberto Clemente bats in the hobby. As you can see, it's got great game use on it. Lots of pine tar, has his number on the knob, 21 in vintage marker. And there was a crack here that is pretty severe crack, but we got good wood repair guys, and we have glued the crack shut. So the bat still is in pretty good shape. And this is a very valuable bat, as Roberto Clemente is one of the most collectible players in Major League history. So believe it or not, this bat at an auction right now would bring a sum of about $20,000. Can you believe that? $20,000 now. Would I ever sell it? I don't know. It's one of my favorite bats in my whole collection. So, of course, Roberto Clemente, his last year in baseball was 1972, which happened to be my first year as a bat boy. As we all know the story, Roberto died in a plane crash after the season, after the 1972 season, on a emergency relief mission to Nicaragua, which had suffered a terrible earthquake. And the people were in need of everything: food, shelter, supplies. Anyway, Roberto in 1972, let's go back to June of that year, and it was my first time being in the clubhouse with the Pirates. What a team that was! They were the defending World Series champions. They'd won the World Series in 7 games against the Baltimore Orioles in 1971. And in June, it was a beautiful day, weekday. I remember it like it was yesterday. And the Pirates were out on the field taking batting practice. It was probably around 11:30 in the morning. And I was watching the players and keeping an eye on the equipment, which is what my responsibilities were. And suddenly, the manager, the new manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates, Bill Verdon, he called me over to where he was standing by the batting cage. And I thought, uh-oh, what did I do? So I went over to see Mr. Verdon, and he said, he told me that I was to go up into the clubhouse, and I was to ask Roberto Clemente, or inform Roberto, that the manager wanted to see him on the field. And of course, I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be interesting. So I was a good kid. I did what I was told. I took the long walk up into the clubhouse, and it was completely still. There was nobody there except for Roberto. It was completely quiet, and Roberto was sitting in front of his locker, and he was not dressed yet. He was just lounging by front of his locker in his underwear. And so I said, oh boy, here it goes. So I walked over very quietly, and I stood close to him, and I said, excuse me, Mr. Clemente. And he slowly looked up at me, and I said, Mr. Verdon would like to see you on the field. And he just stared at me for a second and looked and didn't change his facial expression or anything. And he said to me, he said, you tell the manager to go F himself. And I'm like, whoa, that's a lot. What do I do now? I was like, yikes. So I figured the best thing for me to do was to get lost for about the next 20 minutes or so. I certainly wasn't going to go back down to the field to see how that was all going to play out. And I certainly didn't want to see the manager. I had done my part, so I got lost. So anyway, I'm not sure exactly how it all played out, but I was incapacitated there for a little while, just taking it easy. So many years later, I've told this story to a lot of my collecting friends, and they knew the story. And in year 2000 or so, we were living in Dallas, and we would go to a lot of card shows. And Mr. Verdon, the manager, was at one of the shows. He was signing autographs, and my friend said, "Oh, you got to tell him a story. You got to tell him a story." I'm like, "No, I don't want to. Leave him alone. I don't want to go tell him the story." So they made me do it. So I went up and I talked to Mr. Verdon, to Bill, and I said, I had this story from way back when I was a bat boy, yada, 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 and here's what Roberto said. And Bill looked at me, and he said, he never said anything like that to my face. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm glad you guys worked it out. So what a great memory, what a great souvenir to have from the great game. I love this bat, and I love all my bats. So that's it for now. I'm getting the sign-off sign from our lovely camera person, who I happen to be married to. Her name's Bridget, by the way. You want to say hi in front of the camera? She says no. So long, everybody.